And then coming down, of course, with the mountains as our border on the eastern side, and our Whenua, Ngāti Apa and Maori down here at the base. So 7,380 kilometres squared is the whole catchment. Mai te kāhui manga ki Tangaroa, so from the mountains to the sea. All of the iwi who are part of Te Awa Tupua described there. So many, numerous hapu, numerous marae who live as people at place, making decisions every day relevant to their lands and their whenua. The regional council responsible for this region is Horizons. There are 3 territorial authorities that we have to work with. They are Ruapehu District Council, Whanganui District Council and Stratford District Council. And the Mayor of Stratford talks about it, and he gives some realism to it, because many of the people that live in his catchment, they don't see the impacts of their lives. So they farm in those upper areas of the Stratford district, bordering on the Whanganui region, but they never see that how they farm impacts on the way that the health and well-being of our awa. So it's really important to take this discussion out there, to go and reach into those parts of the catchment so that they can hear from us, the people that live alongside the awa, the impacts of the totality, how they farm, what their farm does, and the impacts of their farming practice on the health and well-being of our awa. The other picture depicts the susceptibility of our land to erosion. So all of the red and pink areas have very high susceptibility of erosion. And people always used to talk about our awa and laugh about it, but actually it's not funny, because the impact of clearing the lands for productivity has resulted in the fact that it's young. The topography is young. So when we have big weather events, all of that land comes down our awa and ends up out here. So you'll see all of the banks, the mud that is, because the channel has been managed, all the mud and the sediment just sits there. Feel like kind of packaging it up and sending it back to them so they can put it back on their land some days. So there's a lot of work happening out at Te Pūwaha as we think about how we can develop, but more importantly, revitalise some of the kai that our kuia and karaua can remember catching out there. They can't do that anymore because of the impacts of sedimentation. So I'm going to talk to you today about a kaupapa that we're working on with others. It's called Maori Tūrua. But I thought I'd give you a picture of what that looks like, what the impacts of land utilisation looks like for us. Here's a good shot, here's a good picture that depicts lands that haven't been cleared, and this is around Whitianga, and lands that have been cleared. And you can clearly see the erosion existing on those lands that have been cleared. And it exists on our lands that have forests too, but they've got more resilience. The cover provides more resilience. So you can see the changes and the impact that it has. This is a photo of the floods in 2001 and our road to Papiriki. So the other impact that we have is the impact of forestry and the sludge. And sludge is meant to be retained on those lands to help with regeneration. Unfortunately though, with such significant rainfall occurring periodically now, what you get is that sludge ends up being part of the problem. And for this community, it absolutely was. And it covered that road into Papiriki. And you can see the amount amount of work that's required to then clean that up. And we're part of that because actually those forests are on our lands. So it's an important process that we all have to go through to think about, okay, how do we ensure we can do some things but have some protection mechanisms in place so that this doesn't happen to this degree. And it's all about conversations, having kōrero, addressing it when it happens and not just saying it was really bad but then doing nothing about it. So, how do we address it? Just some statistics from the Horizons data collection. This is on freshwater management units. And this chart depicts spots throughout the catchment in relation to water quality. And so the water quality overall, orange is poor, C is fair. And if you have a look at that top diagram, the majority of the water quality, particularly down the bottom of the catchment, because of that sedimentation, is poor. This next one is in relation to aquatic life. If you know aquatic life, it has, it requires some good water conditions for it to really survive. So it would be only right that aquatic life in parts of the catchment too is poor and fair. So Maori Tūroa. It's a large-scale taiao restoration project focused on the lands bordering the tributaries and the main stem of Te Awatupua. So the Department of Conservation came to Ngā Tangata about a year and a half ago, or maybe 2 years, and started negotiating over Jobs for Nature. And they presented something that they wanted us to deliver. Well, we took that and went away and changed it all up and sent it back to them and said, well, this is what we're going to deliver. It's a 4-year program of work focused on working with our landowners to improve the health and well-being of our waterways. What usually happens in those Jobs for Nature approaches is that they contract you and you stand up crews to go out and do the fencing, the planting and the pest control. Well, we're not experts in that field, so why would we do that? So we went back to them and said, no, we won't do that, but we'll work with the people who do that. We've got our own people who are contracting for fencing, who are contractors for planting, who are contractors for pest control and weed control. We'll work with them and connect them up with the landowners. So essentially that's our approach to Maori Tūroa, is to work with, identify the landowners, or the landowners identifying themselves actually, and then we work with local contractors and support them to build their capability and capacity to fence wetlands, riparian areas, to exclude pests and stock from within the margins. Planting and maintenance of native trees to reduce erosion and ecological improvement. And don't get me wrong, for some of those lands in the upper catchment, they actually require retirement. But we've got to understand that they took over those businesses, those farms, they've become their farms and their livelihoods for generations too. Giving them up and retiring them, even though for us it makes sense because they're so hilly, they're actually not good for much. To them, it's giving up their livelihood and something that they own. So we have to think about, well, how can we look at changing the use of those? How can we look at supporting them to get some sort of recognition that that retirement has a value? And I think carbon farming provides an avenue for that. So turning some of those blocks into regenerative forests has some value for them. And to ensure that we've got survival of those plants, we have to put in pest control. So when we're fencing off the margins and planting, we've got to actually do some weed control first. So spot spray, I've become an expert in how to plant. I'm actually not doing it, but you have to know what you're getting into, so you've got to learn. So spot spray, otherwise you get what happens is people put plants in, next minute you're getting called to go and get the weeds because the plants are getting overgrown by the weeds. So spot spray, clear it, prep it. Anyway, I could go on all day. For us, what's really important about Maori Tūroa is supporting the health and well-being of our awa, but in doing so, we have to think about how can we source plants locally. So I'll talk to you a little bit about that too. Our framework for Maori Tūroa: restore, rebuild, revitalise and protect. So what does it look like? So over the period of 4 years, our ambitious aim is to fence 290 kilometres of waterways across Te Awatupai. To plant over 450 riparian trees and 180,000, I said trees, I forgot the thousand, 450,000 riparian trees, 180 non-riparian trees, and those are supposedly for erosion protection. But the team's always building their knowledge, so they have just recently discovered some of our native trees that are actually good for erosion on steep hill country. So, we're adopting and adapting as we go. Restoration of our freshwater biodiversity, habitat, animal and pest control to protect riparian planting. And these are about conversations, because I've got one of the Whenua, they've got an awesome piece of Whenua, but they don't want to kill the goats. So we've got some hard, kei te pai, well, we're not going to fence it because the goats are just going to eat the plants. So, and that's okay, it's up to the people. Whatever's okay, whatever's right for them. Anyway, it's our first year. We've just come through our first year. We've spent this year mainly setting up the foundation, building the knowledge of the team. The team's led by Gordon Cribb. Tried to persuade him to come with me today. I already got him to do a presentation recently, and he's a bit of a shy fella, so he obviously didn't come today. But Gordon, he's from here. He's from home, the Middle Reaches. He's grown up on the awa. We managed to get him to come home after 10 years overseas managing major projects. And he's supported by a team, and some of the team appear in a couple of slides. So what we've done is we've run expressions of interest, and it's still open. So anyone interested in having their lands participate in Maori Tūroa can go onto our website, ngātangatatiaki.co.nz, and can register. Have a look in the menu bar for Maori Tūroa, and there's a form for landowner interest. So far we've got 36 landowners, and they could be collectives or just little wānau blocks. And we've also got 26 contractors signed up to do the mahi. We've completed first year, little start, only 11 kilometres of new fencing and 4.9 maintenance of existing fencing. So we've got heaps to do over the next 3 years. We've planted 3,281 blako in this first year, and done pest control, so prepping on 90 hectares. But it was really important for us to make sure that we could seed source our seeds locally and eventually do restoration from within the awa. So we're supporting, and as part of our approach, nurseries, and we'll talk about that shortly. But the map shows you the catchment. Those dots are all the expressions of interest we've received. The red dots are all the expressions of interest we've received in this first year. So that work is going to be carried out over the next 2 to 3 years. Focusing on fencing first, then prepping the land for the planting seasons. And you can only plant in certain periods of the year. I learned that too. And so, you know, in the rainy season, where the plants, obviously it makes sense, where the plants are going to get watered. Because what's happened sometimes in some of these projects, they're planted off season and the plants have died. So there's been lots of learnings by others that we've been able to learn from. And the light green shades on the map are the Whenua Maori. So those are the Maori land blocks overlaid onto the catchment. And then you can see where we correspond with that in terms of the interest. We've got a prioritisation in our investment approach through Maori Tūroa for our Māori Whenua first. Mainly because really hard to get investment into our Māori land. Sometimes really hard to get agreement to get the investment in our Māori land. So, you know, we're having some conversations with the judges to think about how can we take advantage of this while it exists. So our small-scale nursery developments, looking at eco-sourcing, native tree supply and seed raising to create that self-regenerating system across Te Awa Tupua. Supporting native nurseries throughout the catchment. So at the moment, we've got a relationship with Ngā Hoewa up in Taumarunui. Te Uruhino is a little nursery in Papiriki that a couple of the boys, Jason Tairoa and Milo, have started to revitalise the hino tree. And so the hino tree has been used historically to as a baking, what do you call it? Anyway, like a rising agent. So you can make parawa out of it and biscuits. And they've made some and they've bought some of that for us to try. I think that, you know, we've become quite colonised in our palate, so it takes a little bit of getting used to. I'm sure though, by the time we refine it, it's going to be amazing. And what's most importantly, it comes from us. It's something that comes from us. So that's a cool kaupapa to be a part of. And of course, down here, supporting Kiritahi at Kiniora Trust and her establishment of her native tree nursery. We're also going to do one in the middle reaches of the awa, so those discussions are still ongoing. Down in the bottom picture is a couple of kaimahi. There's Bubbies there with her red hoodie on, and next to her is Kimi. So I'm just going to play a little video about some of their mahi and the experience that they've gained on their journey.
Kia ora, but we come to Wellington to study observation seedling. The whole reason for us going was for the middle wrist. The lack of knowledge and how to contain the middle wrist at the time. So the Q Millennium Seed Bank came to New Zealand over those 4 days and got a quick sniffle. From there, I had been selected in May to do a more intensive seed training technique course at the Wakehurst Millennium Seed Bank in London. I was there for 25 days. I learned more intensive seed banking technique. We were actually living at the seed bank. The book's under us. We got to go and saw pictures of the machinery, the drying, all of that. So we got to use that stuff. We got to actually use it all. Now we're seed banking out here. We can dry a little jar of seed. They can dry many jars. They do lots of checks on the viability of the seed. They take half the seed banking and then so much are taken for testing, and then they get the country, the partnership that they have, they get to keep so much. So the Millennium Seed Bank is like the Doomsday Bank, the vault. There's a lot of people gather seed in their countries, but they're just taking the seed. And then they want to learn about the morphology of the seed when it's dispersed when it's the right time, about when it flowers. They just want to know that. They don't want to know that. They want all the biology and the scientific part of it, but they don't really care about the other purposes it has. Its purpose. I noticed that they didn't care too much about the rest of the environment. We look at the big picture, and I noticed with them in these it was very much not like us. We did do a presentation when we got there. I tried to explain to them about our where I sat within from the mountain to the sea and the significance of our river and where our hapu sit along the river. I reckon the big aim will be is to have iwi sea bank. Because only iwi within the hapuna their tribe land. They want other countries to be able to set up their own sea banks. Because it's getting so big that they can't house everyone's seed anymore. So what they really want is to educate people so that they can go back to their own countries and start their own seed bank.
So that's Kimmy, and as she described, she's done some work to go overseas and understand what the importance and how to look after seeds and that seed bank over there and what they had done. So Kimmy's part of our team, and some of them have just come into the room over there trying to sneak in. Bubby's had a red hoodie on. She's just kia ora to the team that have come. But I think for us, it's just the beginning, and as we've gone about this work, we've seen everybody else that's doing work out there. So MPI is doing something, the Ministry for the Environment's doing something. We've met people like Trees That Count. So a lot of corporates are wanting to offset their carbon by planting trees. So Trees That Count have trees to put into the ground. So they're around, and we've got a cool little education set up not far from town called Piwaiwaka, or Piwakawaka. They are doing education on the Papaiti side of the awa. And so we get to see there's all these people. Horizons are doing restoration projects, but everyone's doing it in isolation. So we invited them to come into the room to actually have a conversation and to say, let's do this work together. So next time we come and have a kōrero to you, hopefully you're going to see one map of everybody who's doing something in the catchment. Because we've got a lot of hapu and landowners doing some really cool stuff as well. But we don't generally come together to think about maybe we should concentrate in this area, get that done together. So yeah, that's a work in progress. So how do you connect with us? You can come into our office, 357 Victoria Ave, and have a kōrero to one of the Maori Tūroa team. If you're a landowner, like I described before, you can go onto our website and you can fill in all your details. The more details that you can put into that, the better. Then we know when we come to visit you, you're not having to repeat yourself. We can come and have a conversation, and the next stage is then mapping out the work and getting you into the work program. Won't happen, might not necessarily happen in the first year, because we're trying to do all the fencing at the moment, and looking at the planting program and pest control over the next 2 years after that. And Gordon Cribb is the guy who's leading it, but he's supported by a really fabulous team of people. Kumatu, taku kōrero I tēnei ata, no reira tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. We've got a wata after, and that'll give the girls time to come down here, because Father's going to play the guitar. Okay, buddy.
Do we want to sing now? I just wanted to check with the hui. Does anyone have any questions for Nancy while we've got her here on what you've heard today? Bear? Kapai. My friend, I do have a question. So you talked earlier about the settlement or the awa itself in our neighbouring iwi. Maori tūrua, is that something that those iwi can participate in? If it's contributing to the health of the awa?
Yeah, so we've had a couple of instances, particularly up in the north part of the catchment, of some trusts who have approached us. We've gone back to those iwi first though, because some iwi have jobs for nature investment and we don't want to be cutting over them. So we've gone back to ask those iwi first if they mind us working on that project. So, yep.
Ka pai, and I'm just conscious we've got some of those in the room, and I didn't want you to feel left out. And also want to confirm for those of us from the awa, don't be all getting offended because some of our neighbouring iwi are participating in some of the programs we often think are exclusively for us. This is about the well-being of the awa. Ka pai. Behind you, Beth.
Kia ora, Nancy. 36 landowners. Is Ātiho and Morikawa included in that?
Yep, so we just did a big project with Ātiho at Whenua. So don't forget, these are the streams that feed into Te Awatukua. Ātiho's got quite a lot that feed into the Wangaihu. Sorry, but we've got to focus over here. But we've just done a big piece of work over there, up at Whenua with Ātiho. And we're currently working on the work plan for some of the blocks, quite a big piece of work actually at Ranana. But that's a mixture, so it's a mixture of Moriko lands and it's a mixture of our lands, because Moriko lease some of yours. Some of you in this room, some of your lands are leased by Moriko. So, we've got to work across with the owners, with the trust, to make sure everybody's okay. We don't need somebody coming halfway through the job and saying, what are you doing? So yeah, a lot of kōrero before the work program gets underway. And I think that one's about, in totality, it will be about 56 kilometres of fencing, inclusive of wetlands and lands bordering those tributaries.
Goodbye. Okay. Well, just whilst we're giving an opportunity for some of the staff from your office to make their way to the stage to join us in Waiata Tautoko, e tika ka mihi atu ki a koe e Nancy mō ngā kōrero kia wakamarama mai I te hui I tēnei ata. So we have a small gift for you, my friend, to say thank you for giving up your very valuable time to be with us here today. And on behalf of the sui, nā tō tāua waene, te koha I tuku, and the girls from the office, this is going to cost me, you watch. Don't get on the stage. And those of you who want to join us, tino mai. Name's the boss. Put this down in my meeting.
From there.